Today's postcard is a most unusual one. We're in Chalfont St Giles in Buckinghamshire, and we're at the Chiltern Country Open Air Museum. Come on,
as well as John Milton's cottage slap bang in the middle of the village.
Whoa! He stopped. What a good boy.
Now, when you think of the perfect English village, what do you think of? Well, Chalfont St Giles is the ideal place that illustrates how everyone thinks an English village should be. Along with its kindred villages of Little Chalfont and Chalfont St Peter, they all sit about 4 miles southeast of Amersham, nestling in the Chiltern Hills in Buckinghamshire County. But this small place is a very big magnet for the literati in search of their own paradise lost.
Edward, tell us a little bit about John Milton the man.
Yes, one of our greatest polymaths sums him up in one phrase. Not just the author of Paradise Lost, which most of our visitors here to the cottage come knowing about. We reveal the other 80% of his genius, because the great epic narrative verse is only a wonderful bonus at the end of it, of an extraordinary 66-year lifespan.
What drew him to this part of Buckinghamshire?
Buckinghamshire has always been, out of London, one of his stamping grounds, as it were. He came from Oxfordshire yeoman stock originally. The family has roots in Oxfordshire. And then, of course, escaping the plague, he was here amongst Quaker friends, so this was one of the reasons why he found himself here at Chalfont St Giles.
What about the blindness? Did that change him in a way?
Yes, I think characters do change when that happens, and his descent into blindness was very painful, indicating by the Royal College of Ophthalmic Surgeons are of the opinion that it looked as though the crisis finally occurred because of a growth or cyst on his pituitary.
Now, we're in the cottage, and this would have been his favourite room?
Well, not so much his favourite room as the room that he literally a bed-sitting room that he would have operated in entirely, because he was unable to get into the upper story. Blind from the age of 44 and 57 when he came here. You can't ask a blind man to just run up and down a ladder into the upper story, because that would have been too scary. So confined here, and he used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, putting to one side a very unhappy personal life and 20 years in politics, which not writing any poetry at all, which he must have felt was a complete waste of time when he came here, having just been released from prison, nearly hung, drawn and quartered for resisting the Restoration. All these awful occurrences have happened to him in what was really a very unhappy life in many respects. And yet, what did he do? He just concentrated on the completion of this amazing work, great huge narrative work.
Well, from Milton's cottage and Mr. Dawson, thanks Mr. D, travel just a few miles up the road to a living museum filled with fantastic features from all over the home counties. A Bedfordshire thatched cottage, an Oxfordshire tin church, and even a barn from Northolt, which was once a thriving hay village, long before the A40 drove its way through the Middlesex meadows.
The fields around there were marvellous for making hay, and this barn, dated 1595, actually comes from there in its entirety. Now, you might think it doesn't look as though it's been finished because of all the slats, but in fact, to get the best hay, you needed to have the air and the wind upon it. And that's why you have these great open slats, as you can see. The birdies in the treetop there are telling you a thing or two about my day out in the Chilterns. I'm having a really wonderful time. I go to so many places all over the world, but I must admit, this is a place of my own personal heritage, the Chiltern Hills, Middlesex and Buckinghamshire, and I'm having a great time here. And I'm going to have a little chat now with James Moyer, who is the director of the Chiltern Open Air Museum. Where did the idea come from?
Well, the idea is a long-standing one in Europe, but the first open air museum was started in Skansen in the 1890s, and England was very backward actually in opening any open air museums. There wasn't one in England until the 1960s, and the idea for this one actually didn't really come about till 1976, and we opened to the public in 1981. So we're actually very young compared to what's been going on in Europe.
But you still keep going because you've obviously going to have to pay a lot to bring all of these buildings from all over the home counties, really,
we do.
aren't they?
We collect from, as you say, from all over the area, and it's an expensive business. We have to number each building up very carefully, all the components, the timber, the bricks, and and then we have them in store for as long as it takes to raise the funds to re-erect them. But we don't actually get any core funding or whatever, so we actually depend on our visitors and the monies that we can raise from trusts and businesses, etc.
But you know, that's ludicrous, he said. I'm not going to be controversial. I'm just going to be. I'm going to be frank and I'm going to be honest. We have a lottery here, the most successful in the world in Britain, and yet this museum here is not funded by anything. You have to rely purely on the goodwill of visitors and people who come in here. Money should be poured into places, not just your own Chiltern Open Air Museum, but places like it for education, for historical purposes. I mean, it is crazy, isn't it, that something like this relies just on you coming here.
I've discovered some more of my own Middlesex heritage here. The long-lost manor house of Astleham, which could have been submerged by the Queen Mary Reservoir.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited. I am very excited. This is Astleham Manor Cottage. Now, the Queen Mary Reservoir near Shepperton, near Littleton, in the south of Middlesex, was made, and when they made the reservoir, they flooded the small hamlet of Astleham, which was a separate manor to Littleton. And they removed one of the buildings from that little hamlet. Now, there was nothing there. There was no church there. There was no pub there. There was a small post office only. And the locals would say you could hear the church bell ringing after the reservoir came, which of course was absolute nonsense. There was no church. But this building was saved from being submerged and swamped by the reservoir.
Now over to breakfast in Bedfordshire, about 3 or 4 houses along from here. A little cottage which came from Leagrave.
I've got my bread. It's part of my breakfast here, and I've got the mulled ale.
There you are. There's your beer. And there's your bread. There you are. There's your breakfast.
Is that it?
Sorry, Russell. Look at this house. This is dirt floor. We have a few sticks of furniture. This is poor, poor people who live here.
And that's what they would have had.
Yeah.
Some
bread and some beer.
But mind you, it's very good. But it doesn't taste like what I would call, you know, that beer you get, which I won't touch with a barge pole. It's sweet.
It is lovely, isn't it? Actually, it has both a little bit of sugar and some spices in. You can imagine.
And I would go like this.
You would, yeah.
I use your bread with the mashed potatoes in.
What do you think?
I think it's wonderful. I really do.
I don't think it's so bad.
Well, it's like a kind of sticky, glutinous.
Yeah, yeah.
Thing.
But of course, it's the vegetable starch that gives it that.
It's just
claggy.
like.
Claggy. It's a bit claggy.
Claggy. That's a good word. What though if I wasn't in this little Leagrave cottage and I was a bit richer?
If we were.
It's only because I know there's cheese under there. So I know that we're going to go up market in a way.
We'll go up market, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Here we have a nice cheese. A proper unpasteurised cheese. And of course you would have had cold meat as well.
That's very nice.
It is.
And I've got my mulled wine.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my quince jelly or jam.
It's actually, do you know, it's marmalade.
Is it?
You know, this recent case about marmalade, some chap was denied the right to use the word marmalade because he was not sweetening it with sugar. Now, this is complete nonsense because the word marmalade comes from the word mamela, which is Portuguese for quinces.
Is it?
Yes. So
it's not
mamela,
marmalade.
that's marmalade. Never mind the oranges and the sugar and whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with mamela.
Well, they didn't have much marmalade in the Iron Age. In fact, they didn't probably have much of anything. I mean, take a look in here. Sheepskin rugs. More sheepskin rugs. And a fire.
This is something that the children really enjoy. They can't wait to get their fingers into this.
What is it?
It's a mixture of animal manure and clay, mainly. The animal manure usually comes as it's dug out from the byres in the farm. Comes with a lot of straw, and the straw, a bit like spaghetti, sort of holds itself together as a kind of knitting. And the manure and the clay are very, very sticky, so we end up with a good structure that sticks onto woven. This is a lattice again of hazel.
Look at Matt, bless. What a handsome beast.
Chris Turner and Matt the dog have even replicated the old field system, 2 for growing crops and 1 left fallow to renew itself for the following year.
Oh, I'm getting old. I've got old. I can't get up. I can't get up. It's because you were sat there and it weren't so steep. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Oh, I've got bad knees. I'm getting old. Right, where do I sit here? I just spoke to the horse and it heard and understood me. Oops, we're going the wrong way. The horse has gone mad. It wouldn't stop.